I know that whatever's next, I guess I've already been writing in some way. And
Right,
in
right.
what manner I've been writing it, I don't know if it's like the guitar riff that I came up with this morning or the, melody I come up with tomorrow, but they'll all in some way fall into place. I can make a guitar speak, right? But what do I have to say of any value?
Right.
What kind of story do I need to tell that someone's interested in listening to? And then the hiatus came.
Do you take into consideration the potential of an audience response to a song?
I honestly don't. And again, this goes back to the song is the biggest ego in the room.
Welcome back on this three-part interview with Scott Hall. We're talking about his album Roads and some of the things that go along with that. Welcome back, Scott.
Glad to be here.
Good. Let's talk more about your music. This is fun. Roads is your first full length. We had mentioned that in the last episode here, but you have a host of other recordings. They vary in length and content and stuff. Let's talk about that and kind of how that journey has been from those to getting to a full length release.
Yeah. It started with, like I always say, it was kind of like this decision. Well, we need one of us to sing.
Yeah.
I volunteered the first 6 to 8 months we were working on a body of work, ended up under the name of Infinite, was an album, an 11-song album called For Someone Else. It was titled as such because none of this was music I wanted to listen to. This is all music for someone else. It was kind of an experiment, not even just like in writing the music, because we knew what we were going for, and it was both of us kind of working on it pretty equally. It was really just the first crack at like getting the process down.
Right.
And so lyrics weren't a big concern. Production and learning how to record vocals, that was the muscle we were trying to work.
Gotcha.
So I think that was late 2018, maybe early 2019, which led into the Alone EP, which came out in 2019, which was a 5-song EP. And that was the first real, like, okay, well, we've got it down in terms of recording vocals. We know what we're going for. Let's try to fine tune lyrics and get them presentable. Gotcha. During the recording of that EP, there was a song in the middle, kind of like an intermission song, that was instrumental, and I think we had it for maybe 6 months, the song, and I tried recording lyrics over it. At one point, I was just like, I'll just play guitar over it. And it was the first time that we like actually recorded guitar, like focused a song around recording a guitar, and as like the lead. That made me realize, like, I think I could do this. I think I could write a rock song.
Oh, okay.
And that next process was months of writing and rewriting. We ended up with an album, maybe closer to an EP called Generated, which is an 8-song EP, okay. I guess, because the lyrics were all randomly generated.
Oh,
we would come up with a theme for like the chorus, maybe we'd write a little bit of it, and then we just like click around on some app and it would spit us out a song, because the focus was recording drums and recording guitars and recording bass, and I'm singing on it. How do we get this all? I don't want to worry about writing lyrics. I'm trying to practice. So although it's not really anything good, it was the first major step in recording. It's like the first major building block to where I am now. That was followed up with a 12-song album called Dream in 2020, which was the first like major crack at trying to do the whole thing from start to finish. We recorded the drums, we played the bass over it, we played the guitar over it, we went in and I sang and we worked tirelessly on lyrics. Very interesting album. There are a couple cool songs on there that, like, to this day I still think hold up pretty well. In late 2020 going into 2021, my most recent EP came out, Solstice, which was like the last major EP before a pretty substantial hiatus, which was a really cool album to work on. We went back to like a little more synth pop kind of like tone, but even still it was again another exercise in writing lyrics.
Right.
Lyrics have been the major bottleneck, I will say, just because, well, like I can make a guitar speak, right? But what do I have to say of any value?
Right.
What kind of story do I need to tell that someone's interested in listening to? And then the hiatus came, and that was a mixture of a few things in there, practicing, learning what I wanted my vocals to sound like and how to
Mm,
get the vocals I wanted, how to sing. And that was 2.5, 3 years of not putting any material out. Not to say that I wasn't writing.
sure.
Nothing came out. Maybe one-offs, like if I had an idea, I would just put it out. And there were a few different albums in that period that were completely written and scrapped. And a couple of those ideas found their way onto Rhodes, but like the core ideas, maybe not like the finished product or anything like that.
Right.
Because it was still a journey of trying to be okay with the way I sounded when I sang into a microphone.
It takes a minute to
And
get used to, doesn't it?
oh, totally. It's humbling because I can hide behind a guitar because I know what I'm doing, but not with singing. That is like literally as raw musically as you can get. That made it very difficult to like come to grips with. And then I started writing, and then the building blocks started coming together for Rhodes. And along the way, I found 4 songs that didn't really match, but they kind of matched. They were like a good way to lead into Rhodes, and I assembled them and put out Lighthouse in late January of this year.
Oh, okay. So that's pretty close releases then between that EP and this album. Now we had talked before that Rhodes was your first full length album, but that's not really true. So this is your first full length that'll be available on all platforms and hard copy and merch and all that.
But it is full length. It is my first real full length, and the only reason I say that is even though I've had 12, 11, whatever, how many song albums or whatever, it might just be a chorus. It might, one song might just be a verse and a chorus and an intro and an outro.
Oh, okay. Okay, I see what
The,
you're saying.
the,
Sure, sure.
these are like songs.
Right. Interesting. I don't think we've ever talked about that before. So yeah, that's interesting. No, that's a good way to separate those. I think a lot of people, myself included, just now think full length as a number, not necessarily as complete bodies of work within those numbers. And I guess it would depend too on the genre and what your approach is. A full length might be just snippets if that's what you're aiming for. But yeah, people's perceptions probably has changed. So I'm glad you said that because that there is a difference there.
That was a lot of like for someone else, and even the Alone EP, because like and going into Generated was the same thing because I wasn't here to write songs. I was here to practice and
Right.
like try to learn a process. And I think I don't really have it down, but I think I know enough about it now that I can like put everything together and try to arrive at, hey, well, here's a whole package.
Yeah.
It's literally the whole package.
Yeah. Going back to something you said a little bit earlier, are either you or your brother keyboardists? I know you do keyboard work, but would either of you consider yourselves keyboardists at any level?
My brother more so than I. And that isn't to say that like I can't sit in front and figure it out.
Right, right.
But a guitar is home. My
Yeah,
I can pick it up and my hands know where they're going,
yeah,
and I can find my way around it, and I can find my way to a song much more easily on a guitar as opposed to a keyboard.
yeah, yeah.
That said, if I'm going in for, oh, the song now wants a piano patch or a piano layer or whatever,
Mhm.
I know how to get that too.
Right, gotcha. I don't think I'd ever asked you that before either. I kind of already knew the answer, but they kind of get your perspective on it. Because there is keyboard stuff in your tracks. So um,
Quite a bit too.
yeah, that's a fairly busy journey for a short amount of time. We're looking at 4 or 5 years, and I didn't count while you were naming them, but what is that? Eight bodies of work that you released?
Seven
Mhm.
major releases, but I consider it all homework. That was all just homework.
Gotcha.
This is my thesis.
But
Y-
but you're allowing the public to look at your homework and grade it.
Yeah, because that's part of it.
Well, that's what I was going to ask next. Is putting stuff that you consider homework out there for people to check out? Is that a testing ground for where you're at and where you're wanting to go?
Well, yeah. And again, we go back to maybe it sucks. Oh,
Right.
well, now I know. Um, that's part of it because part of the process is also figuring out how to deliver it so that people want to listen to it, and what do people want to listen to, and not that anyone wants to listen to my music, but you're not going to get feedback. You're not going to know what people want or what people grab onto unless they have access to it.
Sure, sure. Do you find that, talking to other artists, and it really just depends, I think, a lot on personality, but most artists are pretty attached to their art, even if they don't think that it's great to be released. It's pretty personal. Do you feel any sort of trepidation when you're throwing homework out there for people to check out, or is it just, I know that this isn't where I'm going to end up, so I'm just testing the waters? Is there a separation that you're able to put there, or is it still really personal?
It's a little bit of both because no matter what, you're not going to be able to remove the personality and the
Yes.
intimacy from it. Like to this day, like if I hear someone put on my song, I kind of cringe. I'm like, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but that is always going to be part of it. But it comes back down to you need to expose yourself to that. What I would say all the time is if I'm sitting here in my studio writing and recording, but no one's listening to it, that I'm not, what am I doing this for?
Well, and I guess that's part of it, right? Is what is your purpose? What is your end goal with it?
Well, I don't know if I can speak to an end goal. I just know that music in some form, it means a lot to me. I grew up with surrounded by it at all levels, whether it be a band or even a recording studio. Growing up in a recording studio as a
Mhm.
child, like that was all part of it. And then and so when I got my first guitar and started practicing and learning, this is part of it now. It was, and it still is. I mean, it's something that will always be there. The goal is to just kind of write and to figure myself out and to figure out where I can go musically. And that's kind of another thing that because we touched on the name of the album as being Rose, but like I'm on my own road in terms of music. Where am I going? Because yeah, I've detached myself from the studio and that whole side of it, but I'm still pursuing music. Like I'm
Right.
still doing it, right? And it's just how is it evolving? And I don't know if that answers your question, but it really just that is very personal.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You have a couple of tracks, and I'd like to hear kind of the backstory of why and if there's a difference. You have a couple of tracks that appear on several releases. Speak to that a little bit. I don't think that that is a super rare thing to happen. I think a lot of artists do that throughout their careers. But you've done it pretty quickly. And so kind of what's the story behind that?
Well, their two songs in particular are the the song Lighthouse from the Lighthouse EP and Fade also from the Lighthouse EP. They are appearing again in different iterations on this record because Lighthouse, the premise was, hey, I've not been putting music out for a while. I'm still working on it. Here, come have a look inside the wood shop. You can look through the window and you can kind of see, hey, things are coming together.
Yeah, yeah.
Here it is now.
Gotcha.
Here's the song. And it could, and I was thinking, well, is that a single? Whatever. And I was kind of like, well, they're not technically singles because you're looking at the same song in two different stages
Gotcha.
of its life.
Did
And
you
I
know
think
that was
that's
going to
part
be
of
the
it.
case going into it?
I knew it was going to be the case for Lighthouse, and there's a reason that Fade went on. I think Fade is a really grabby song, and it fit nicely on the album. And I wanted to do more things to it to kind of make it to fit better. It really it sits nicely on Road.
So what's the difference between Lighthouse EP and Lighthouse album?
Well,
Are
so the
they
light
remastered? Did you add things? Did you?
I took things away and had a different approach. So the EP version starts very slowly, and then we go into like this bass, like this very heavy dun 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 dun. Dun. But it really takes its time and it builds up on the album. Where you start with the bass dun 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 dun, dun and it's a little heavier, and it kind of builds up, it's a lot more full.
How was that? How did that transition happen? Did when you had it on the EP, did you feel like it was finished? And then as you were working on the album and you knew the Lighthouse was going to probably end up on that list, did you look at it and say, okay, we need to go back and revisit that?
Any of the songs on Roads could have been on like they were all in the wood shop at that same time.
Gotcha.
I just specifically chose Lighthouse to be the thing I let you look at. and I just kept working away at it. And
So it really was an intentionally separated, unfinished project for
yes,
the album.
yes,
Interesting.
Lighthouse and Roads are they kind of go together
Yeah.
because of that. So the two unique songs that are on Lighthouse are also, and that's the thing about Lighthouse that I find very interesting is because they all go together because they're all very minimalistic. Well, and because they're all just demos.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
That was gonna be what I asked next. Yeah. If you kinda considered that EP more of a body of demo work than
yeah,
like a
and
EP.
yeah, the demos I stand by. Like I truly stand by them. Like they
Yeah.
stand on their own.
And isn't that strange
And
how some tracks, even in their demo form, can stand on their own? And
oh,
sometimes
totally.
when you do a demo, you're like, "Yeah, this is definitely a demo." And other demos, you're like, "No, this is actually about 1 second from being a complete track."
And that's the thing I would say is true for Lighthouse on the EP as opposed to the album.
Mhm.
Because it just took honing in the things that were already there and really kind of putting those finishing touches on it that sent it
Right, right.
and let it really find a home on Roads.
Is there anything on Roads that might end up being a remixed, remastered, extended play, whatever, single release in the future? Do you have anything that you've considered that with? You've gone from the demo release to now here's the finished. Have you ever looked at any of your tracks and gone, you know, I really would like to take this further, but it's not either one going to be radio friendly, which in today's streaming world is not as big a concern, or it's just too much for the album, but I think that it needs something else with it.
It's not off the table, and that's something that I've considered, especially with a handful of the songs. Or there are a few in particular that I really think that might be very cool to do that with. But as it stands now, they're all so complete in terms of vision and scope that I'm happy with where they're all sitting. And I think that this might be, in terms of these songs, this might be it.
Okay.
Like the ultimate version.
Yeah, yeah. It just came to mind because you've done the demo to finished. And then I was just curious, you know, are you going to do a finish to what could happen if we did this to a track? And sometimes, you know, that can end up being overkill. And sometimes you end up with a gem out of that because it goes where you didn't think it was going to go. But so yeah, that was just a curiosity question. Was the relationship between Lighthouse and Rhodes intentional from the start, or was that something that you came to after you heard Lighthouse and Fade and went, "Oh, this really needs to be out there now while I'm finishing up the rest of this project."
It was kind of a promise. I'm not saying that like I had people like breaking down my doors, hey, where's the music? But
Mm,
like the question was asked, like, hey, it's been like 3 years. What's
yeah,
going on?
yeah. Because you had mentioned the wood shop idea where you were giving them a peek at the album, but I didn't know if that was, and I think you kind of just answered it, if that was motivated by you had a track that you were like, wow, this really needs to be out there now while I'm finishing stuff. Or like you said, people going, hey, hello, do you have anything else for us? We want some new music.
It was kind of a little bit of both. And like I say, and it could have been any of the songs on Roads on Lighthouse. But something about Lighthouse, the imagery of it, the story that I told, I thought, okay, this stands on its own. And then I picked a couple of the other ones and the two of the songs, Fire and Blown Wide Open, which are unique to Lighthouse and don't appear again. Fine tuned Fire and Blown Wide Open, and so that they were kind of complete and I could leave them, I could leave them behind with
Gotcha.
Lighthouse EP. But it was just kind of like a promise, like, hey, look, there's stuff incoming.
Yeah.
I think I just went with Lighthouse more than anything else for the kind of like mysterious, what is this, tone that it had. I think that's why I was like, well, if I'm gonna do one of these, this is the one I'm gonna pick
Gotcha.
and really focus on that.
Yeah. Was the Lighthouse EP also the first that you had distribution on?
Yes, and that was
Was
the
that a
kind of
test for the album so that you could see the
that's
process?
exactly right.
Sure,
That's
sure.
exactly right.
Of course, we don't know quite yet what your long-term response is gonna be to the album, but how has your response been to the Lighthouse EP?
It's been great. I've heard that Fade of the four songs, Fade is probably the. I opened the EP with Fade, and I think it really grabs you. It's very upbeat and
Mhm.
fast, and
I know
and
that
and I
track
think that
stood out to me for sure, so that
yeah, and it's a cool song. But I think Fade and Lighthouse, the tone of Lighthouse is what I've heard a lot about in terms of very mysterious. Like, and this is something that I kind of want to cut on when it made it to the actual album, which was it takes a long time for the song to get started.
Ah,
It's like, okay, we're sitting here for a minute.
yeah,
I find it cool on the EP version. It adds like this air of like, what is, what
yeah.
exactly are we doing here? A little bit of ambience kind of stuff that I wrote into it. But on the album, we're going straight into it.
Do you take into consideration the potential of an audience response to a song when you write, or do you think about the song it's by itself?
I don't care about what anyone has to say. I honestly don't. And again, this goes back to what I truly believe, which is the song is the biggest ego in the room.
Mhm.
Like, hey, well, why did you put that guitar solo in it? The song wanted it.
Right.
Like that's why. Like I'm not going to sit here and defend my like I had no control.
Yeah.
Like the song demanded it.
Yeah.
Um,
The kind of the motivation behind that question is you hear a lot of people, especially today, in the 70s and 80s, you would have intros that were a third of the song, or you would have breaks in the middle that were a third of the song, and people didn't care. They wanted to hear that. And
right.
you talked about, cutting to the chase on the album. And so I was curious if that was a consideration on the listener side. This was nice for the EP, but on the album, we just need to get to business so that people can check out what's happening.
It was kind of like I think this is actually what the song wanted to be.
Gotcha.
Like the final version of the song, it adds to it in both ways. It's just different flavors of it.
Gotcha.
And I'm letting you taste something different with the album version.
Yeah. I know that, there's a story about Yes's break into the mainstream with Roundabout, and how originally that was a, 5.5 minute song or something. And the record label's like, yeah, you can put it on the record, but we're not going to release it as a single. And Yes was like, no, this is the single off of this album. And they just couldn't get anybody to agree. And finally they sent it to the DJ, and he agreed with the record label, but he also agreed with Yes and said, well, let me try this. And so he went
Right.
ahead and put it on the radio. And at 3 minutes, he just reached over and turned the fader down, and
Yeah.
people loved it. And so when they released it as a single, they released both versions. So if you listen to it on the radio, you heard the 3 minute hit, but if you bought the record, you had the radio and the original release to it.
Right.
So
And that's something that we're working on we're working on a version of that.
gotcha. And there are songs that are 4 or 5 minutes long, 6 minutes long, that don't feel like they are. And there are 3 minute songs that you wonder why they're 3 minutes long, because they were done a minute and a half into them. So
Right.
yeah, you just never know how that's going to turn out. You are always, always, always writing new material, whether
Maybe too
it's
much.
whether it's experimenting to learn something, or intentionally to write a song. Right on the heels of releasing this album, are you in the studio working on the next project, or do you just write, and then as you get a collection, do you look at it and decide whether or not it's going to be a release?
I am actively like concepting a few things right now.
Oh, interesting.
I'm writing, of course, but it's gonna take time, and it's gonna take that. Oh, this is what it is. Okay, great. We have everything falls into place because that's what it is. We could be writing, and then there will be a everything falls into place moment. I'm intentionally with the stuff that's on the horizon. I'm taking a very intentional approach with what I'm trying to put together. But there's always going to be more music. That's what I'll
Sure.
say.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Do you consider Rhodes your first real album?
Totally.
They talk about the sophomore danger on albums, where you've got a huge smash first release, and then your second release, people are like, what just happened? And sometimes that happens on your third release. Are you trying to stay in your writing, stay within kind of what you've always done? Or on this new material, this is all tricky, probably secret information. But do you feel like when you get done with the project, when you start a new one, that you want to do something different? Or do you feel like you have a whole bunch of content, it all feels within this, and you're just taking chunks off of it in absorbable pieces?
Well, here's a way to answer that question. Whatever album is next, I guess I've been writing for the last 6 months.
Gotcha.
'Cause, you
Sure.
know,
Yeah, yeah.
it, something's always in the works.
So you don't
I
step
just, I
back
just, I
from an
just don't.
album and start at 0 again. You're just
I,
continuing.
it's you just a constant churn
Yeah.
of
Okay.
ideas, and then I'll reach a point and I'll start combing through them, and I'll be like, all right, well, here are 10. Well, let's cut these out. These aren't. These don't go. Oh well, here. Okay, now I have 8 left.
Yeah.
Well, I only want 4 of these. Here's an EP.
Yeah.
You know, that might be what it is. It also might be that, I've got a chorus for that. I just have a chorus, and then, a week before the next album comes out, I the rest of the song comes together, and
Sure.
so it's kind of tough to answer because I know that whatever's next, I guess I've already been writing in some way. And,
Right,
and
right.
what and in what manner I've been writing it, I don't know if it's like the guitar riff that I came up with this morning or the melody I come up with tomorrow, but
Yeah.
they'll all in some way, shape, or form fall into place.
Yeah. Well, I think next I would like to spend some time diving into each of the tracks on the album. So we're going to dive into the album next.
Very excited.
All
Very
right.
excited.